We're going to start reading here in a moment in chapter 1. Before I read in chapter 1, I want to read a few things from my notes to kind of set the stage for what we're talking about tonight. In our study, we've called Hot Topics. We've been all over the place about different things that we've discussed, but trying to pick things that are relevant and things that are in people's minds, and whether you're thinking about it or you need to be thinking about it, one or the other. Those are the kind of things we've been dealing with. And tonight we're going to talk about the subject matter of evolution. We'll talk about evolution and what it is, and what it is embraced as and what it is seen as in this world. And then ultimately, I want to challenge us tonight on maybe how we should view the idea of evolution. I want to read a few things to you that I've copied because I wanted to get exact specifics. Evolution is a theory that was initially introduced to the world, at least as we know it, by Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is primarily known as the architect of the theory of evolution by natural selection, and those are all words, we'll talk about some of them in a moment. With the publication of On the Origin of Species in 1859, he advanced a view of the development of life on Earth that profoundly shaped nearly all biological and much philosophical thought which followed. When Darwin published that book, it truly did and has become, I guess, a bestseller, you could call it. And not just a bestseller where everybody read it, but it really has become the mindset, almost the religion of much of the world in which we live today. It's very interesting that one book can do that. But, and I got to be careful because I'll get ahead of myself and never get to where I'm supposed to go, but it's very interesting how that happened. And I think there's a very simple answer as to why that became such a popular concept, all of Darwin's theories and all the things tied to it. In its simplest form, I do believe that man, in his heart and mind, longed for some way or another that there could be everything and not be God, okay? Somehow, could there be everything and there not be a God? And man in his sin longs for that. Boy, I would love to not have to answer to anyone, you know. What would you have done? And I don't know if you were in my same situation or scenario, but when I was a kid, my dad would leave in the morning going to work, and I know he wouldn't be home till about 4:30. And me and my brother had free reign of the house. We could do whatever we wanted to do, and we did many times whatever we wanted to do, but there was one thing in our minds at about 4:30 that blue Chevy Love was going to pull in the driveway, and we were going to give an account, right? We were going to give an account. So how many times did that keep us from doing what we would have done? Because we knew Dad was going to be home. And when he came home, we were going to have to stand before him, you know. And that was a fearful thought. At least in my house it was. It was a very fearful thought. That he's coming home, so you better be ready. I think Darwinism and the theory of evolution took such great... I think it took such a prominent place in social thinking because in man's heart, that's really what he was looking for. His theory included many different conclusions that he had come to concerning nature and the world. In our present day, and this is in the church app, at least some of the notes are, in our present day, his theory and many of the thoughts tied to it are still prominent today in our educational system. If you go to a government school or a public school, you are taught in some form or fashion the theory of evolution. And not only is it taught there, like when I was in school, I remember my teacher making mention of it as if it was dumb. I remember that. Like, this is something I have to say, and I don't believe this, but I got to say it. I remember her framing it that way, and we spent a little time talking about it, and then she kind of went on with whatever. That's not how it is anymore. It is now taught as truth. And it's not just taught as truth, it is believed as truth by many of those who are teaching. And I say that, I want to emphasize that for a moment, and I will absolutely chase rabbits all night and be in trouble. And if I don't get done, I'll do it one day, okay? But that is one of the great dangers of the public school system, the secular school system of our day, one of the great dangers is it's not just taught there, it is believed there. And I know there's some Christian teachers, and don't have to come tell me afterwards that your aunt is a teacher, and I understand that. But predominantly, the education system, the secular education system, has been handed over to those who not just teach these things, but they embrace and believe these things. And when you embrace and believe these things, and we'll get here in a moment, that shapes everything about who you are and who you will become. It does. I remember being the product, though I was from Mississippi down in the South and all of those things, I remember being the product of secular education, and it is 100 times worse now than it was then. And I remember some of the beliefs that I had in my heart and in my mind, and how long it took, and I still hadn't arrived by any means, but how long it took God just to change my thinking about all of the crazy things that I had implanted into my mind and heart that were so wrong, because they were coming from what we know as a humanistic worldview or viewpoint of life. Humanism and theism, those are the kind of the two that are at odds against one another here as we talk tonight, or they're the two different sides. Humanism, man is God, he's at the top of the totem pole. Theism, God is God, and he's at the top of the totem pole. And those two are pitted against each other, and the secular education system of our world has completely bowed down to the humanistic worldview and mindset. There's no question that that's true. By the way, and if you don't, then that's your call completely. You're parents, and you make decisions for your children. But that's why many of our parents in our church have taken their kids out of the public school system and now either pay for them to go to school somewhere or pay for them to stay home and go to school. But either way, people have removed their children from this theory, this mindset, this humanistic worldview, because we know that it is in complete contradiction to God's Word. Now, let me tell you what I'm supposed to say tonight. I was supposed to go through all of evolution, explain it, and talk about it, and then not let on that I really am against it. But I can't do that. I can't help myself, right? So evolution, Charles Darwin, where it came from, you probably already knew that. And it is definitely the prevailing theory of our day, especially in the secular world, in the secular education world, especially. And that is why there's so many things in our society, in the younger generation, that are completely in contradiction to what your beliefs are right now. If you got any gray hairs at all, and if you cover them up, we'll count you as well, right? If you have any gray hairs right now at all, our society is in complete contradiction to what your views and what your beliefs are right now. And the reason for that is largely because of what we're talking about tonight. I truly believe that that's the case. Many people accept these teachings as fact, while others either reject them or entirely, or either they embrace some of them in some modified form. Some in our day claim that there is factual evidence that evolution is true. And some of their main arguments to support this thought, some of their main arguments are as follows. I'm going to run through these quickly. What are the things that people who believe evolution, what are the things that they say proves that it's true? Well, a few. Number one, anatomy. They say species share similar physical features, and because the feature was present in a common ancestor. In other words, we find a couple of different individuals, or even man and some animals, have similar features, which in the evolutionist mind means that they both had a common ancestor. They all came from the same person. Man and monkey, they both have a lot of the same features, so that means somewhere down the line, if you traced it all the way down the family tree, unless you were from West Virginia, if you traced it all the way down the family tree, you would find some common ancestor, something that they both came from. So that is the argument of anatomy, and they say that proves, that's one of the proofs of evolution. The second one, molecular biology. They say DNA and the genetic code reflect the shared ancestry of life. In other words, if you took two different living beings that are completely different species, different kinds, and you looked at the DNA, there are similarities in DNA, so they say that proves, again, that they both had to have the same original one or being that they came from. So that would be molecular biology. And then third would be biogeography, the global distribution of organisms and the unique features of island species reflect evolution and geological change. In other words, as you go to different areas and different places, you will find things that have adapted to their area, and also you will find things spread and placed in different areas around the world. Fourthly, they say the fossil record documents the existence of now extinct past species that are related to present day species. In other words, you go dig up in the ground and you find a fossil of something that is similar to something today. That fossil proves that this used to be that, and that's their thinking. And I'm trying to oversimplify this so everybody understands at least kind of what I'm talking about. They say that fossil record proves that that for sure evolution has taken place. And then fifthly, this is the fifth argument, direct observation. And they say we can directly observe small-scale evolution in organisms even today. And because of that, they conclude that evolution has to be true. And they say those are the actual facts, or the evidences, if you would, for evolution. These are some of the main claims that the evolutionists present to prove their stance on the issue. Each point back to Darwin and his findings as proof of what they now believe. Darwin's theory was built largely on his assumptions connected to the observations that he made, many scientific observations even, as he observed animals and different things. And specifically, he spends a lot of time talking about some particular finches, some birds that he observed. One of the most iconic evidences for evolution are Darwin's finches, when Arthur writes. These are the birds that Charles Darwin cataloged on his voyage as he went on the Beagle. It was a ship he was sailing on in the 1830s. Darwin demonstrated differences between the various finches. He observed finches, and in each of those birds in the islands, some finches had one kind of beak which was suitable for their environment, while other finches had another kind of beak which was suitable for their environment. Darwin took that example and others like it as an example of what he saw as evolution. So the question then, and I hurried through that way more than I should have, the question that we need to ask as those who want to look at the teachings of evolution and Darwin and discern the truth about them is simply this: do these evidences truly point to evolution as a truth, or is there some other explanation? And in considering these questions, I would like to present for our consideration 4 truths to consider before embracing evolution. So here's what they are. First of all, most of the evidences that are pointed to and said to prove macroevolution can also be proofs of a common creator. Now, macroevolution would mean something changing forms, and then we're going to talk about in a moment microevolution. That would be small changes like the finches that Darwin observed, where their beaks were just different shapes, different sizes. Let's read from the Bible before we dive into this one. Genesis 1, in the beginning, verse 1, God created the heaven and earth. First verse in the Bible just tells us that. And by the way, it assumes here that there is a God. It doesn't even try to explain that. It just tells us that there is a God. And then it tells us that God who is made everything. He created it. Skip down, and I'm skipping a lot, I know, but skip down, if you would, to about verse number 20. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth, in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the water brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply on the earth. And the evening and the morning was the fifth day. Verse 24. And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Here's why I picked those verses to read out of all the ones there about the creation account. It's because first it declares God created, but then secondly, it keeps using this phrase, after its kind, after their kind, showing us something that is an essential point to observe from the Bible as a Christian to understand what our concept of evolution should be. God created everything in a specific kind, a specific species, something that it would not be able to cross away from. You will never find a dat. You know what a dat is? Cross between a dog and a cat. A dat. That's pretty deep, isn't it? God made them to reproduce, and it says over and over again, after their kind. Dogs breed with dogs and have dogs. Cats breed with cats and have cats. And by the way, humans breed with humans and have humans, right? That's what happens. That's how God made it to be. Never does the Bible give any possibility of there being any type of change of form or macroevolution where something that was a dog would change into a monkey or change into a human or change into a fish. Never once does the Bible give any possibility for that at all. So for the Christian, if he wants to believe his Bible and understand the Bible, then he can say, I know without a shadow of a doubt that what's taught in macroevolution is not true, because the Bible clearly states that God made things in their specific kind, and that kind's going to reproduce and produce its kind, and that's what it's always going to be till the world ends, and it will be. You'll never find a dat. Don't worry. There's some cartoon that used to be on that had a dog cat. I don't remember what it was called. What was it? Cat dog. Okay. But that's not real as a cartoon, right? I know that Terry was really not sure about that, but it's not real. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. God created them after their kind. So back to number one. Most of the evidences that are pointed to and said to prove macroevolution can also be proofs of a common creator. Here's the answer to all of those arguments I read you a moment ago. There's a reason why they all have similarities. All living creatures have, whether it be blood or oxygen or cells or just take your pick, DNA. The reason for all those similarities is not because they all came from one tadpole, billions of years ago. The reason they all share things in common is because they all had the same maker. They all came from the same place, but it wasn't a pool of water in the eons past. It was a God who spoke into existence and said there's animals, there's fish, there's birds, there's cows, there's humans. He is the creator of them all, and the fact that they share the same creator explains why they have so many things that they share in common. So the first argument, or many of the arguments that I read you a moment ago that are seen as evidences of evolution, are actually equally could serve as evidences of creationism. They had a creator who made them, and that's why they look the same in many ways. That's why they have the same systems in their bodies. It's because he made them. The same one made them. Number two, by the way, macroevolution is the idea that you do really have a tadpole that becomes a frog, not a frog because tadpoles do become frogs, a tadpole that becomes a monkey, and then the monkey that becomes a human over millions of years. That's what macroevolution is, actually changing form. It's moving into something else. Secondly, the presence of microevolution would make sense And that's, by the way, how you will find those finches with different types of beaks depending on what environment they're in. Or you might go somewhere and find lizards that do something differently or shape differently or have different processes in their bodies based upon where they live. Or you might find humans that are different skin tones because of where they live and the sun and different things of that nature. The presence of microevolution, changes, small changes that happen within a species, it would make sense that an intelligent designer who was aware of the ultimate outcome of his creation, that he would build into his creation such abilities as to evolve based upon their surroundings. A wise God who's able to create everything that we know would definitely be able to say, you know what, number one, these people that I'm creating perfectly and putting them in a perfect situation, they're going to mess it up. Amen? He already knew that. Jesus was slain before the foundation of the world, right? The Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. He knew they were going to mess up. So when God designed us, he designed us such that our bodies could adapt to the condition in which we live today. He made us so that we could. And by the way, he created many other things that he made likened to that as well, so they could adapt. Because I promise you, where we live right now is very different than where Adam and Eve lived day one of the creation of their lives. Very different. So God built into his creatures the ability to evolve. So when we observe microevolution, what we're seeing is us being able to adapt to where we are, where we live, and the environment around us, and the things that we deal with, the hardships that we face, the things that are necessities for us to exist. God built those into us. We're able to change as necessary. Microevolution. And by the way, microevolution is real. We do adapt. Animals do adapt. Those finches that Darwin wrote about, he didn't make that up. Those finches did have different beaks based upon what they were having to do to get food, etc. Because they evolved individually as an animal. They evolved to be able to live, exist where they were, where they had been placed. God made them adaptable, would even be a better word to use. God made them adaptable. And a wise God, of course, he would do that. Number 3, evolution would require that there were some intermediate forms present. Let's talk about that a second. Evolution would require that there were some intermediate forms present. In other words, if the tadpole really did become a monkey, then what did that look like in the process? Just think about that for a moment, okay? Because we have little jokes about, he kicked his tail off and came out with 4 legs and started walking around, and then he climbed a tree, and got a tail and started hanging another. He lost a tail and then got a tail. Interesting. But anyway, what would that look like? To go from a tadpole to a monkey. And then what would it look like to transition? And we've seen this drawn out in the book. It's got to be real because it was in my science book. Right? Don't you remember? Right? You remember? You saw it. It's real. It got a picture of it in the science book. They wouldn't put anything in there that wasn't real. Here's the problem. If that had been, and let's just say there were millions of years for all that to transpire, there would have to be some evidence of those transition periods where we would find a monkey with a tadpole head or find a human with a monkey head or, whatever. But here's the deal. There are no such things. Now, we need to understand, I didn't know this for a long time in my life. When you see one of those things in the book where they got that guy's head and it looks like he came from Planet of the Apes, David, yep. Or you see the Nebraska man and all that kind of stuff. What they found, I didn't know this. I felt dumb when I discovered it. They didn't find they were digging one day and, oh man, here's some dude laying here and his whole body's laying here. Look at this. They didn't find that. I was confused. No, in many of those cases, they found a tooth. It's look at the size of this tooth. And it could have been your great-grandpappy that just had mutilated teeth or something. I don't know, Look at this, or look at this hip bone. This is completely crazy. And they built a body to match what they assume it would have looked like based upon that tooth or that bone or that part of that skull, etc. I didn't know that. I thought when I saw that picture in my science book, that dude, they dug him straight up out of the ground and he still had hair on it. He still had his beard, right? That's what I assumed. That's not true. It's not true at all. And we have been sold in our school, and our children in our schools have been sold a bill of lies. It is absolutely lies. And they are presented those things as fact, and that's not fact at all. There's no such thing as that at all. A tooth is not the same as a complete human skeletal remains. That is not the same thing. You've been lied to. And we embrace it because, hey, it was the head picture in the book. It had to be real. Mr. Ed, they wouldn't show us something that wasn't real. There would have to be some forms of life, or at least fossil forms, remains, that would bear that. If there was a monkey man, we'd find one. If there was a tadpole monkey, we'd find one, right? But there are no tadpole monkeys nor monkey men. And if evolution were true, there would be. If macroevolution were true, there would be. There's no such thing. Number 4, ultimately, though evolution is widely accepted across our land tonight, no evidence proves it to be true. No evidence proves it to be true. There is no evidence. There is no evidence that proves evolution to be true. Now, are there things you could observe and maybe come to conclusions and assumptions? Obviously there are. But there are no proofs of evolution. You might be taught that there are. You may read that there are. But there are none. None. No proofs of macroevolution whatsoever. All the things that are observed and are pointed out to be proofs of macroevolution could also equally be looked at and said, hey, actually, that's a proof that there's a real God who made you. And he's a very sharp dude. Because look at what he thought of. So really, when it boils down to it, I've said this before, and I hate to repeat it, but I think it's pretty good. We built a house down the road 2 years ago now, I think. During COVID, the worst time ever to build a house in the history of man, probably. But we built a house. Didn't have windows for a long time, but we finally got windows. It was wonderful. But that big white farmhouse down the road in the middle of that pasture, nobody's ever driven up in our yard and said, how did that happen? Nobody ever said that. You know what? Nobody ever will drive up and say, how'd that happen? They'll say, who built that house? It is foolish, by the way, back to Psalms. The fool has said in his heart there is no God. It is foolish for us to act as though we would know that a house didn't happen, and yet something as complex as the human body and life, that it could just happen. There are no proofs of evolution. Man cannot create life, and I promise you, we got some sharp dudes in this world and some very complex and advanced tools at our disposal, and not one time have they ever taken nothing and made something. It's not possible. You cannot create life other than God. It's the only way that life can be created. So thus, what's my opinion about evolution? My opinion is that there is no such thing. Not macroevolution. And yes, many people have embraced it, and yes, they would look at you like a complete moron if they knew you didn't agree with them. But who is the real fool? Well, the Bible tells us the one who says there is no God. So, whatever that's all worth to you tonight, I'll say this once again because I want to make sure that it's harped upon sufficiently. There are no proofs of macroevolution. There are theories about it. There's drawings that people have devised to try to further its efforts, but there is no proof. However, there is much proof that there is a God. You look around outside, and you can see that He is. Romans chapter 1 tells us that. You can see that He is by the world that He created as you look around you. You can see that He is by the heart that you have inside of you, and His law that He wrote on your heart. And when you get into the medical world and you begin to even see for a moment the complexities of the human body, just one part, like the eyeball, any part, those all scream that there's a God. So, in my opinion, evolution is a very feeble attempt to rule out God. And I would say that it is a failed attempt, because they will never rule out God. But the sad reality is many in our world have embraced it as truth because they don't want there to be God. Think on that.